Well, it took me about 2 months, but I finally finished watching Code Geass, Launch of the Rebellion, and today I wanted to dive into the plot of Season 1 as much as I can. If you're new to this channel, typically what I do is I literally break down like episode by episode, plot point by plot point, and talk about what I liked or what I didn't like, and kind of just break down everything that I watched. But unfortunately, I've been very, very busy as of late, so this literally took me a couple months to finish, and I just finished Season 2. So there's going to be only so much that I can gather from Season 1 to present to you with today. So be prepared if you're a regular viewer of this channel. We're not going to dive into as deep as Code Geass as we typically do with any other anime show. Regardless, I want to sit back, I want to talk about it because I did enjoy it. We're going to talk about that in just a second. Before we do, though, I do want to say hello, everybody, and welcome back to another video. If you're new here, my name is Kyle. I am your guy with many YouTube channels. So I want to give my general thoughts on the entire series, and again, we're going to be focusing on Season 1 here. I started watching this because I actually asked ChatGPT what show I should watch next, and I mentioned that literally my two favorite shows ever are Attack on Titan and Better Call Saul. And even like ChatGPT told me to watch Code Geass. Crunchyroll even had it under like, if you liked Attack on Titan, you'll like this. I see now that the show's done the similarities between this and Attack on Titan, and I've seen nothing but ultra positive like reviews about this. I've watched a couple video essays, and don't get me wrong, I enjoyed it, but I didn't think it was nearly like the best thing that I watched. I thought it was just good. It wasn't great. It wasn't phenomenal. I thought it was just good. It kept me entertained enough and intrigued enough where I kept watching it, but nothing too crazy happened. There were only a few moments here and there that really kind of tugged on my heartstrings. The ending was nice, but I think this is just a little bit overhyped. But don't get me wrong, again, I'm not hating on it or anything. I just thought it was good. That's about it. Then again, that's the issue when you're comparing it to something like Attack on Titan, right? But honestly, I'm not doing that. That's not the case. I'm looking at the show entirely objectively. So I'm just going to dive into the plot. And again, I'm not going to go like super in-depth with it. I'll definitely be going a little bit more in-depth when it comes Season 2 because obviously that's what I just finished watching. But the series starts off with this character named Lelouch, and from the get-go, I thought they were all built weird, like they were awkwardly tall, to be honest with you. But then, it's so funny what anime does sometimes, man. It's the same thing that I kind of dogged on Fire Force for, is because you have like Suzaku and Lelouch and every other character ever that is just built so lanky and weird, and I didn't really like the art style, to be honest with you. But then we have C2 and we have Colin, who have like the most perfectly defined hips we've ever seen. You know, I find it a little bit funny, to be honest with you. So my point being, it put me off a little bit from the beginning, and C2 was obviously a little bit nicer to look at, and the reason that I just thought about that is because we're going to get into C2. We're brought to this character named Lelouch. He ends up finding himself in the middle of some sort of terrorist attack or a transport of some sort of weapon, which we didn't know at the time to be C2. Long story short, Lelouch ends up saving her. He reunites with Suzaku, but Suzaku doesn't want to kill Lelouch, and obviously he's working for Britannia, who wants to kill all of the Japanese people known as 11s. Suzaku was ordered to shoot Lelouch. Lelouch, he didn't want to shoot Lelouch, and C2 ended up coming in, being that secret package who Lelouch saved. And long story short, she gives him the power of Geass, the power to use your eyesight to control and manipulate anybody against their will. You can order them to do whatever you want, and they will do it. So Lelouch immediately goes, all of you die, and they all end up shooting themselves, and this is the beginning of the entire series. I have mixed feelings about Geass because I think they told the story with it really well. I love the limitation that it had. I like that other people kind of have their own superpowers, but it's really tough. Again, like the Geass wasn't this incredible storytelling thing that people are making it out to be. I thought it was cool, man. I was interested to see what the contract would be with C2. That kind of fulfilled it once I first found out about it, but that's something we're going to get into when we talk about Season 2 in another video. Once I found out about it, I was like, okay, you know what, that's okay, but I was curious about what the contract was the entire time, and honestly, I had no idea even, like, where that was going to go, to be honest. And this is kind of the problem that I'm having with this entire series, because I can't really dive into exactly what, like, not exactly what happened, but I'm kind of glossing over it because you had Zero helping out with some battles. Lelouch decided he wanted to be Zero. He wanted to lead this force called the Black Knights, and he ended up he really likes chess, by the way, and he ended up playing people like war like it was a game of chess. Everybody started trusting him. He started doing more things that, and I don't know if I've already used the word, but I don't imagine the T word is YouTube acceptable. Hopefully I didn't, but regardless, He ended up having more acts like that, kind of just playing the politics game. And meanwhile, Colin was trying to figure out if Lelouch was Zero. He's helping Nunnally. There's not exactly a ton to break down there besides that. And at this point in the series, I wasn't necessarily hooked. I wasn't hooked yet, but there was one thing that really, really kept me and getting me really watching the show and intently waiting to see what happens. And that was the entire plot point with Shirley, because Zero ended up causing, what was it, an avalanche? He ended up causing an avalanche or something like that and just decimated a grand number of people, and ended up being one of those people being Shirley's dad. And Shirley, we didn't get into Shirley, but Shirley was the first love interest that Lelouch had, and they had kind of an awkward relationship. And this is the part that really had me on the corner of my seat, because I was kind of sitting around like, oh my god, is she gonna figure it out? Oh my god, because she ended up in that moment where Lelouch ended up figuring out like that she was still waiting for him on the date in the rain, and she was just sobbing. He ends up showing up even though he's late after just decimating people. Shirley cries in his arms, and Shirley ends up kissing him. And Zero is forced to face the reality, like C2 ended up telling him that every single person that you kill has a story just like Shirley. You just have an emotional attachment to Shirley. And Lelouch is so like hell-bent on making sure that the world's a better place that he's willing to make these sacrifices that are at the same time so evil. And now he's sitting there kissing Shirley, and she doesn't know that he killed his dad. And it only gotten even better when we dove into the plot point with Mao, because we had that whole situation where Shirley decided to visit a battlefield, found Lelouch's own identity, or at least like she was going to shoot him. She didn't shoot him. And then you had the whole plot point, because we didn't know exactly what happened. You had to wait to see, like, Lelouch had to suspect whether or not Shirley figured out who he was or what was going on with Shirley. But then Mao ended up diving into her mind, and because Mao could mind read, and kind of convincing her to shoot Lelouch. She ends up passing out, and you have that whole story with C2. And this is the part where it was really, really heartbreaking, because Lelouch ended up using his powers to make the only girl that may have loved him, even after you killed her dad, Lelouch used his own powers to erase the memories. And this is where I thought it was a little bit weird, because the story continued on with because they had their little date, and everybody's kind of like, oh my god, you're really pretending not to know him? Like, was that really what you're doing right now? That's the dumb anime part that sometimes the show kind of gets into. But I thought all of that was a very, very powerful, like, I really enjoyed things like that, things with Shirley, things with C2, even like his relationship with Colin to an extent, his relationship with Suzaku. I found all of that much more interesting than the grand war for Britannia. That's how I feel about this entire series. I wish it dove a little bit more into Lelouch, maybe using the Geass around the people around him, which he eventually gets to. Like, we have that whole plot point, and was that in season 2 or 1? This is the problem that I'm having with making this show, because again, I watched it about a month ago. Was it in season 2 or season 1 where Lelouch ended up using his Geass on Suzaku? I'm having a little bit of an issue recalling exactly what happened, so I'm going to dive into the other part that like was really, really moving for me, and that was the entire point with Euphemia. Of course, Lelouch was already exposed to Mao, who couldn't control his Geass, and it drove him insane, and was kind of being set up to that. He ended up having a private meeting with Euphemia, and this is the part where I was like, whoa. That's the only part of the show so far up to this point, because there were more parts where I was kind of like so intently watching, was when he accidentally used the Geass power on Euphemia, just joking around, being like, well, I could just order you to kill all of the Japanese people, and it works on Euphemia. No matter what she does, she goes and starts a complete mass murder. I like the fact that Lelouch is still feeling guilty, but he collects himself and uses it to his advantage. He feels horrible about what he did, but he still is so focused on the goal that it doesn't really matter. And to watch Euphemia, after everything that we just saw happen with her, go and just start mass murdering everybody. Like, she walked up to the microphone, she's like, will you all please die? That was arguably the best part in this entire series. I couldn't believe what I was seeing there, and that was the big standout moment to season 1. The other big standout moment to season 1, to be honest with you, my dog, the other big standout moment was the ending, because I was very confused on what was happening, because you had that standoff with Lelouch and Suzaku pointing the guns at each other, and I thought that was a fantastic way to end the season, because that's a great cliffhanger. But I watched the next episode like immediately. Both of them ended up pulling the trigger. You don't know who died, but Lelouch's mask got knocked off and his identity was officially revealed to Cullen. So now you have people figuring out who Zero really is, and that being Lelouch, and it's setting up for a very, very chaotic Season 2. I apologize that, again, I didn't dive nearly as deep into the show as I would like to. It's difficult to recap, especially if I watched this a little while ago, but I still didn't want to talk about Season 1. I didn't want to make a video on the series as a whole. I wanted to really dive in specifically to Season 1, and I touched on the best plot points. Like, Euphemia arguably had the best plot point in the entire series. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and it was absolutely horrible. But we will be talking about Season 2. While we wait, though, why don't you check out the Attack on Titan finale and my thoughts on it. My dog is doing something weird, guys. I will see you over in the next video. Take care, everybody.